Hi, everyone. This is Taya, the managing editor at Photomasters, and I'm here with Ian, the founder of Photomasters. Today, we're going to be talking about mentorship and the importance of having a mentor. Ian, what do you think about mentorship, and how important is it for someone to have a mentor in the first place as a photographer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that, having a mentorship is not critical. It's not something that you absolutely need to do. But I do think that finding a good photo mentor is a really fantastic idea. It will create a shortcut for you. It will basically make the path for you to become a better photographer shorter and easier. Because a lot of times when we're learning photography, we're just figuring things out on our own. And you might have a intuitive sense about creative vision and things like that. Like, people will say, oh, you've got a creative eye. But that is something that you develop through your own personal trial and error and intuition. And I think having a mentor who's more experienced, who can actually verbalize some of these things that you were figuring out intuitively, that process can actually make your evolution as a photographer happen much quicker. So I think it's a really good idea to have a photo mentor, because it is just going to help you get there faster, and it might open your eyes to things that you would not have been able to figure out on your own. What about you, Taya? Have you had any personal experience with a photo mentor?
I did actually. And so when I first started out, I was really young, and there were a bunch of photographers that I was following online. And one of them, and there was one in particular who really stood out. She just took the most beautiful photographs of people, of herself. She influenced me greatly in self-portrait photography. And so I would often bug her with questions. And initially, I was just curious. What is this? Like, what are those circles in the background? What are they called? How do you create them? And she patiently answered each and every single one of my questions. And then eventually, indirectly, became my mentor. I would go to her for advice, for guidance. Sometimes I'd give up on photography for a few days. I'd swear off photography. I'd say, I'm never going to pick up the camera again. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this feeling. And she would support me. She would find a way to get me back into it by using encouraging words or just sharing examples from other photographers' lives. Definitely had a huge influence on me, and I'm very grateful for her.
So what were those circles in the background?
Bokeh. Or bokeh, as some people like to pronounce it. I think either pronunciation is fine.
And so this was something that you saw in photos, and you liked it, and you wanted to figure out how to incorporate it into your own photos. And your mentor was able to explain that bokeh was the out of focus background, and that was able to allow you to incorporate that creative tool faster than if you would try to figure this out on your own.
Exactly. And keep in mind that back then we did not have ChatGPT. I was a 12-year-old kid. I didn't really understand anything about photography. I knew a lot about drawing, but certainly not photography. And so just simple explanations from her helped me so much, and definitely provided me with shortcuts that allowed me to enjoy the process of taking photos even more.
But it wasn't just learning about the technical aspects of photography. The mentorship helped you learn more about the artistic aspects of photography.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes I would ask her more philosophical questions, such as, what kind of story am I really trying to tell here? And she would prompt me with interesting ideas and ask me deeper questions that would allow me to explore my photographs on a deeper level. And I think especially with self-portrait photography, it can often feel like a very shallow type of photography. Some people think that it's on the same level as selfies. No offense to selfies, by the way. No offense. But because she often took self-portraits, I had more confidence to take self-portraits of my own without worrying about what other people thought about me. To me, it's an art form just like any other. And so with her guidance, I felt a little bit less alone in that regard.
Well, it sounds like you had a great experience with a photo mentor. I too had a photo mentor in my early days, and it kind of came about accidentally. I wasn't seeking it out. I am self-taught as a photographer. And so my mentorship happened accidentally. I met a photographer while I was out in the field doing photography. He was, as it turns out, a professional landscape photographer. At the time, I was just an enthusiast. And he was older than me and, been in the business for a long time. But we hit it off. We started talking and then we exchanged email addresses and eventually started a correspondence that blossomed into a full friendship. And this, of course, was the legendary George Stocking from Arizona. So anyone who knows me knows that I talk about George a lot. That's why he's legendary, is because I'm singing his gospel. And he was a professional landscape photographer based in Arizona for decades. And he worked a lot with some prestigious landscape photography magazines. At the time, Arizona Highways magazine was one of the biggest places for landscape photographers to get published. So he was a regular contributor to that magazine, as well as many other publications at the time. And so we became friends. And I never explicitly asked him to help me or to mentor me. But one day we were together and we were going to go on a photo trip together. And he said, well, why don't you show me some of your work? And so we sat down, and this might be hard to imagine for folks living in the digital age, but we sat down at the light table, and I took out my color slides and put them on the light table to show him my photographs. This was definitely back in the good old days. And while we were reviewing my photos, he would ask me questions. He would say, well, why do you like this photo? And I'd rather dumbly answer, I like the colors, I think. I didn't really know. Like, I had this intuitive sense that I had taken a photo that was good. I liked the photo, but I couldn't explain why. And so I would stumble over my explanations and say things like, I kind of like the colors here. I just like what I captured here. This was a nice sunset. And he would be like, no. That's not why you like this photo. And then he started talking about the abstract artistic qualities of the photos, talking about the composition, the use of shape and line, and the creative use of light. And I had never heard anyone talk about photography this way before. There was a language behind all of this, and he had that background. And so he knew how to verbalize what was otherwise just a subjective feeling that I had. He was able to give me some objective words to describe what was going on, and it completely opened my eyes. It completely blew my mind. This was the first time I'd ever had any experience with talking about the artistic side of photography. There's, lots of conversation about the technical stuff. But here he is talking about using leading lines and how the shapes related and how the compositions were constructed and, how the light created patterns of light and shadow, etc. And so this is the first time in my life that I had talked about any of this stuff, and it completely revolutionized my photography. So at that moment, I was able to verbalize what it was that I was trying to accomplish with my photos. And I think that's really critical. And so if I hadn't gotten that nudge from him, that push in the right direction, I never would have developed as an artist, or it would have just taken me so much longer. And so this kind of rudimentary critique session that I did with him eventually blossomed into long conversations about the art of photography that I had with George. And those conversations were the genesis, eventually, that became the ebook that I published years ago on the art of composition called Visual Flow. And that was kind of the beginning of my photo education endeavor. So that quickly morphed into more ebooks and instructional videos, et cetera. It was basically how I became someone who taught photography and taught the art of photography to others. And so that never would have happened if I never had that early mentorship, or if it did happen, it would have taken a lot longer and probably would have taken a much different path. So, I'm eternally grateful to George showing kindness to me as a young photographer who had no idea what he was really doing. He took me under his wing, whether I asked for it or not, and it made me the photographer I am today.
What is the process of reviewing portfolios like for you as a mentor?
Yeah, so what I like to do is to have the student pick out what they consider to be their very best images or their favorite images, and put together a portfolio of about 40 or 50 images. And I like them to make that first cut. I think it's important that the student actually take some time to think about, okay, what are my very best pieces? What are the, how do I put my best foot forward? Which would be the pieces for me to do that. And I think it's better than, for example, the student just showing up with hundreds of images and asking me to pick the best one. I think everyone has got to be able to identify their stronger images, and that process of forcing yourself to think about it is really critical. So we start there. And so then I'm looking at the portfolio and I'm trying to identify the images that I think really stand out, that I think put that person's best foot forward artistically. And so I go through all the images, and where I think there's room for improvement, I will give that feedback. If I think an image isn't as good or as strong as the student thinks, I'll let them know, like, hey, this is not one that I think should be in your permanent portfolio. And for the images that are good, I will explain why they're good and offer some thoughts about how they could be made better. Sometimes a simple crop will improve an image, just make it more impactful and powerful. But my goal is to give people objective tools going forward so they understand why I think something works or why it doesn't work. For us to have that conversation to get people thinking about the language of artistic photography. So understanding why something is successful and why it isn't successful, and giving them some objective verbalization that they can turn into a tool that they can use going forward. So I don't just say, hey, I like this photo, I think this is good. I'm going to explain exactly why I like it or I don't like it, exactly what I think can be done to improve the photo. And hopefully the photographer will walk away from that experience, first of all, with a better idea of which images in their portfolio they should be sharing with the world, but also with a better idea of where they should be taking their creative vision, some concrete steps that will help them improve their creative vision, to refine it, and also to get them inspired and get them thinking about where they'd like to take it. Because ultimately, creative vision is personal. When you talk with me, I am going to be coming from the viewpoint of my own personal creative vision. And so I tell everyone to take my comments with a grain of salt. What I like and don't like may not be the same as another artist. And it may not be the same as the student. The student may decide, you know what, Ian didn't like this photo, but I feel really confident and passionate about it, so I'm going to keep it in my portfolio. And that's great. I want students to walk away with a bit more confidence about their own creative vision and some clear ideas of where they can take their vision next to evolve as a photographer and to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, I like what you said, because it's not about blindly following your mentor. Your mentor is there to provide you with constructive feedback, to inspire you, hopefully. And so your job is to also have your own opinions, to ask the right questions. It's a relationship. It's not just you following someone blindly. And I think that's the best part about it.
Yes, the mentor is there to give the student a creative nudge, to maybe point them in the right direction, to get them thinking about new things. But for example, I think about my experience with George. He was a fantastic mentor, but there's a lot of things that he and I don't see the same way. And my creative vision is very different from his. And so I didn't become a mini George Stocking. I became more of Ian Plant. Basically, he helped me find my creative voice and to amplify that creative voice. And so he definitely had an influence on me. You can see his influence in my work. There definitely is an homage to George Stocking in my work, but my work is very much uniquely Ian Plant, and he helped me get there. And that's what I'm trying to do with others.
Shout out to George Stocking for helping Ian, and thank you to everyone for watching this video. Thank you so much, Ian, for joining me today and for sharing your experiences with mentorship with me and the audience. And I hope that everyone in their life gets a chance to either be inspired by or work with a photography mentor.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Taya. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you guys again next time. Bye-bye.